Welcome to Glass Half Full with Leslie Krongold. She shares her stories, experiences, and knowledge of living and coping with a chronic health condition. Learn about tools and resources and hear inspirational interviews that help you to live a life filled with quality and dignity. With 2 decades of support group leadership, Leslie's ready to help you make lemonade out of life's lemons. Are you ready?
Welcome to this week's podcast. Some of you may know that this month of October is National Disability Awareness Month. I did a little Googling on this topic and discovered the correct name actually seems to be National Disability Employment Awareness Month. This is news to me. I was on my city's Commission on Disability Issues and we created a banner which read National Disability Awareness Month. Oh well. In 1988, the month of October was declared by the United States Congress to raise awareness of the employment needs and contributions of individuals with all types of disabilities. And the origin dates back to 1962, when this acknowledgement was only 1 week long and named National Employ the Physically Handicapped Week. As all things change, we no longer use the term handicap. We now have a month of awareness, and we're more inclusive. We recognize not just physical disabilities, but people with developmental disabilities, mental illness, and hidden disabilities as well. Hidden or invisible disabilities include psychiatric conditions such as bipolar and anxiety disorders, depression, and PTSD, as well as epilepsy, AIDS, diabetes, cystic fibrosis, and numerous other medical conditions. So, what does it mean to be disabled? Well, a dictionary definition says it's having a physical or mental condition that limits movements, senses, or activities. Does it coincide with the diagnosis of a chronic health condition? Well, it didn't for me, and even now I struggle with the term, and you'll soon hear from a couple of my friends who have also had difficulties with the term. I worked for many years after I was diagnosed and put off applying for disability benefits as long as I could. Not being physically able to hold a full-time job was the beginning of my identification as a disabled person, but still I waffle with the identity. I feel so fortunate to have lived over 35 years without any knowledge of having a debilitating condition. It's not that I feel sorry for younger people with disabilities, but I'm sure their reality is different than mine. I believe for many people, there is an image of the disabled person being confined to a wheelchair and perhaps using other assistive devices to help them function. No one talked about disabilities when I was growing up. It was taboo. Like some of the other topics I've addressed in previous podcast episodes, this is just the beginning of a conversation about the D word. The first guest I spoke with about identifying as disabled is Cheryl Sherman. I met Cheryl several years ago through the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Cheryl has CMT, Charcot-Marie-Tooth, one of the 43 different conditions recognized by the MDA. I've always been very impressed with Cheryl's great attitude and her zest for life. She and her husband do some exciting travel, which you'll hear more about in a future podcast. She was also really helpful for me when I started to consider the process of applying for disability benefits a few years ago. Here's our conversation when I asked her how she experienced her diagnosis and identifying as a disabled person.
I didn't know anyone in my family, and as far as we can tell, I'm still the only one in the family that has the condition. When I got diagnosed, I was completely shocked and kind of, you know, just taken aback by the whole thing. It was, it was a challenge at first because of my challenge walking, they suggested that I wear braces, which are also known as AFOs for the feet. And the first pair that I got was really bulky. I couldn't use the very well to push on the gas pedals. I had a hard time doing that. I don't know how many swear words I used trying to get home after that. So it took me, a couple years to, I think, kind of come to accept it. I was trying to, at some points, deny the fact that I had to wear braces. I didn't want to. I mean, I still did wear them, but I was trying to find ways to cover them up or have the prosthetic doctor make them differently. And one prosthetic doctor actually was fine making them in different shapes, and he would mold them differently. And he wasn't firm or he didn't do a really great job explaining why they are designed the way they are. But I kept on having him trying to make them smaller and smaller so that they were not noticeable. But then they were useless because I kept on tripping and falling, and it just wasn't really working. And so it took me a couple of years to finally really come to, peace about the situation. And, I have a lot to thank with my husband for that. When I met him, he was a big part of that, coming to peace about it. Also, I've done some transformational work through an organization called Landmark Education, and have had big breakthroughs in my life. And one of the areas that I took on was in regards to my viewpoint, in regards to my condition.
I asked Cheryl about the first time she used a wheelchair. Many people with a muscular dystrophy will use a wheelchair in certain situations and still be able to maintain walking in other situations. Personally, I use a wheelchair in airports and occasionally at events involving lots of people and waiting in lines to help me conserve my energy.
We went to Great America and we rented a wheelchair from Great America. And I probably wasn't too thrilled about it at the time, but I have since got used to it. There's times where I get the thought in my head, I wonder what these people are thinking, that type of thing. But I know that for my best interest, it will be much better off for me to give in to my ego than to suffer the consequence later on when I can't walk seriously because I'm too sore.
And naturally, I asked Cheryl about her relationship to the D word, disability.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I use the term on occasion to, I think, get my point across around things, that there is, I'm dealing with a condition or a disability versus, being having nothing, no problems. But I think there's also a mental attitude. I don't consider myself to be I'm disabled and therefore can't do anything in life or whatever. I think there can be this stigma of what does disabled mean. And I feel like my way of viewing it, I can have an empowering context to the word disabled and not have it mean anything significant or down. It just can be a state of this is the condition I have. Versus some other people might be very concerned with using the word I'm disabled. It's just a way for me to sometimes describe what's going on. I have this disability, but not as a big deal or not as a way to stop me from living my life. And I think that some people can use the term to say, oh, I can't do anything then. So it can be more a mental attitude than, I mean, I think that you can use the word in a variety of ways to either have an empowering context or a disempowering context to it. Mm-hmm. And I choose to have an empowering context about it. And I'm on disability and, I have this condition, but it's not going to stop me from living my life to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are no easy answers. It's an ongoing process for me. And it varies. There's some days I really feel disabled.
Right. Yeah.
And there are other days where I do have, a few hours where I forget I have this condition and I feel great. So, I think that for people who've never had any kind of chronic health condition or period of disability, because of course there are people who, may break a leg and they are disabled for a period of time and they get a temporary placard for their car or something.
Yeah.
There is that preconceived notion of what disabled is, and then they may look at people like us in a certain context and not know that we are quote unquote disabled. It's very interesting, and it's something I want to ask. I want to hear from a lot of different people, because I'm sure we all have struggled with it in a variety of ways.
Yeah. And I think that for me, where I can get tripped up is getting concerned with maybe what others think. Mm-hmm. And really that doesn't matter. Like, it's really what's going on with me and, am I being true to myself? But, there can be that concern of, well, are they going to think I'm disabled? Like, I physically don't look like it in many ways. I look normal, but there is those concerns that can arise in my head.
Yeah, I often have a hesitancy of going into the disabled bathroom stall, and because I'll be ambulatory.
Right.
And
mm-hmm.
I don't refrain from it, but I do have momentary thoughts of, oh, someone's looking at me and thinking, what's she doing? And, it's for those bars. The grab bars. For a lot of people, it's really, you work on your core strength, but, we all, many of us with a muscular dystrophy have diminished muscle capacity in the core, so you need that sort of leverage to get up off of, especially some of these public toilets are very low. So that's one. So everyone out there, if you see me go into a disabled toilet, I need it. Yeah, it's so funny. I was on the Commission on Disability Issues here in Alameda for a few years, and we would do outreach at different events, and it was at the hospital we have here representing the commission, and it said Commission on Disability Issues, with a banner, and this woman, gosh, I have no idea, definitely a senior citizen, was using a walker, and she was walking by. And I said, oh, excuse me, can I tell you about our commission? And she looks at me and at the sign, says, I don't want to know about disabilities. And she
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a triggering word for so many people.
Yep.
And, coming to terms with what you have is another really important thing, because especially when you find out about something like, that's going to be a more long-term condition. I guess my approach has been, rather than burying my head in the sand and just allowing that to be the way that I'm living my life, I'd rather take it head on and live my life.
My next guest is Stephen Beard. We met several years ago, more than likely at some disability rights event. Stephen has cerebral palsy and is a realtor and specializes in finding accessible homes for people with disabilities. He's presented at my support group meetings several times and is one of the most affable and positive people I know. I started our conversation asking Stephen about how he identifies as a disabled person.
Oh my goodness, Leslie, that's a real loaded question. I could spend an hour just talking about that. Okay, so just briefly, may I share my own personal story around that?
Yeah.
Until I was in my late 30s, I did not identify as disabled. I ignored my disabling condition. And to be fair, my disabling condition is primarily limited to mobility challenges, walking in a little bit of an unusual way. But in other ways, it never was impactful in my life. And there are a lot of reasons why I did not perceive it to be impactful in my life. Now, there's a whole other thing about how it was impactful in my life in ways that I refuse to acknowledge. But anyway, in my late 30s, that is when I began to address these issues and start thinking of myself as a person dealing with a disability. And I am, when I in the early 2000s, when I started doing real estate, that's when I really started meeting people in the disability community. And it was when, that was when I really began to learn a lot more about different types of disabling conditions, and I began to learn more about the community. We have a very active and very passionate disability community here in the East Bay, of which I'm proud to be a member of. And so, yes, I definitely identify as a person with a disability. I haven't always. I just basically ignored, I basically acknowledged that I walked funny. That was the way we said. I had a leg doctor when I was a little boy, my leg doctor. And when I was 17 or 18, I went to see this orthopedic surgeon, and he basically said, "You're okay, go live your life. I don't want to have anything more to do with you." I was actually very hurt by that. And this was the mid-70s. I mean, they weren't very sophisticated in their approach there and then. When I was a kid, I remember distinctly other kids who I didn't know teasing me. Most kids ignored it. But I remember other kids teasing me about walking funny and me just laughing and ignoring them. And also I was very lucky. My parents refused to treat me differently than my siblings. They pushed me to go out and play, to be physical outside. They pushed me to go out and do stuff. They refused to let me believe that I couldn't do anything I wanted to do. It was a gift. It was a gift.
And so in your 30s, do you remember what shifted for you?
Well, yeah. So there's a gift and there's the curse of the gift too. I mean, I'm very, there only comes a certain point at which you have to stop ignoring the reality of who you are and the fact that you're perceived differently. And there were certain things in my life that I was very upset about in my mid-30s. And it wasn't until that I began to look at myself and say, this is who you really are, that I was able to overcome those difficulties and go to the next phase of my life. And so that's the curse, that's the flip side of that same coin, right? You know, all my life I was raised to ignore my disability, but ignoring it came with a price. And when I stopped ignoring it, I was able to move forward. So, and it's led to so many amazing things, including the work I do now.
So tell me about that.
So when I got into real estate, I knew I wanted to do real estate in a different way. And I will never forget, I was out for lunch with a friend of mine that I'd met in a job counseling program I was in through the state. It was a state program to help professionals get new jobs because I was unemployed and I was trying to find work. Anyway, I went for lunch with this colleague and I said, I want to get into real estate, but I don't know what I'm going to do in real estate. And he said to me, I mean, it didn't even occur to me, but he said to me, Stephen, why don't you do real estate for people with disabilities? And I said, oh my God. And so from then on, everything changed. And I wrote a business plan. I interviewed brokers. I picked a brokerage who I said, because I told them, I said, I'm not going to be successful in the first year. I need time to develop this community and develop what I'm going to do. And I may not sell a lot of homes in the first year, but I'm going to be successful at this. Mm-hmm. It's been life-changing. It's been life-changing. The work I've been able to do in the community, the high I get off of helping people who are dealing with disabling conditions, not just physical ones, to buy property. And it's not just about, the person who needs a ramp. Any agent can find a house that has 0 thresholds, but it's about understanding special financing. It's about understanding how different modalities work. Like, for example, the regional center system for people with developmental disabilities, to know about what that's all about.
Sorry about that abrupt end there. Stephen definitely has more to say, and he'll be part of a future episode, I promise. I hope this discussion has been thought-provoking for you and broadened your awareness of people with disabilities. I welcome your thoughts and contributions on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Glass Half Full. Leslie invites you to leave a rating and review on iTunes. This helps spread the word to others dealing with chronic health issues. For show notes, updates, and more, visit the website glasshalffull.online. glasshalffull.online.